And welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true gnosis. And today I got my first live in a while because I've been sick pretty
Dude,
bad.
you have been sick.
I'm a zombie right now, just coming out of the ground. That's how I feel. It's coming out of the ground right now and jumping on alive real quick.
What better title that you come up with? Resurrected from the Dead Sea.
Yes. And the reason why for that title is also because we have Dr. Kim Davis jumping on for an hour of his time. And people, if you want to ask questions, please submit some questions. Obviously, super chats. Get the first serve because you paid for it, and it's part of it's what I got to do to sort of keep this thing going.
Let me say that for you because you're always so shy to just say it. You're being sick for the week and a half really was a setback on the algorithm for you in terms of income. So anyone who super chats, you not only get your question answered, of course, Dr. Kip's going to be coming in and he'll be answering your questions, but there is levels to heaven. And if you just want to make it to the next level, right, you just gotta, do your thing. So seriously, help my boy out. Help my boy out.
Risen from Sheol. Yes, that's exactly what it is. But so Kim Davis is going to be in here any minute. We're going to talk about Dead Sea Scrolls stuff. Also, let me jump around and get into some other stuff too, some historical Jesus stuff, because you and I have been working on a course with Dr. Delcy Ellison Jr. about the quest for historical Jesus, and we're going to talk about that as well. But speak of the Magus, the resurrecting Magus. I'm just kidding.
I was gonna say the devil.
No, Dr.
Magus. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Looks and sounds good. How you doing, Dr. Kit?
Good. How are you guys?
Good. What are you working on? So what's the new project that you're working on? I always want to know what Dr. Kit's working on.
It's my my new comprehensive series on the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Wow.
So this is after I did the Michael Jones videos like over a year ago. Somebody asked me what was next, and I had at that point decided, I'm going to do like a proper video series about the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I started laying it out then, and I had it divided into, at the time I had it divided into basically 10 parts. I thought it'd be like 10 videos. So, and it's taken a long time just to kind of get this mapped out. In the intervening time, it's turned into 11 parts. And about a month ago, I actually finished writing out the script for the first part. And it's like 15,000 words. So
wow,
I decided that's too much. So now
it's like Old Testament right there, right?
Yeah, right. So now the first video has become 3 videos. And I expect, with the way that I've got this laid out, what I want to do with it, it's going to probably be close to 30 videos in total.
And these are going to be on your Patreon, right?
I think this is going to take off.
Okay. I got to first just mention, if you haven't subscribed to Dr. Kill, who's going to resurrect you when you die? I mean, this guy he's got access to that, but he also has the Patreon. So, go join and follow him on the Patreon. And of course, when do you expect it? You're going to drop it off piece by piece, I suspect.
Yeah. So what's going to happen is I am delivering part 1 as a total freebie to everyone. And my hope is to have that. So the video is done. It's ready to go. I'm waiting to publish that until I'm finished the second part, and I'm about halfway done that. I want to get the second part done before Christmas. And then, so sometime later this week or maybe early next week, I'm going to drop both of them. Everybody can watch part 1, which will set up as a premiere on YouTube. And then they can all run over to my Patreon and join and watch part 2 right away.
There you go.
Good deal, right?
So if I may, you ask this, Neil, and cut me off anytime I'm over speaking, because I always talk and you're sick. So I'm just trying to fill in for your voice because you were coughing controllably over the past few days when we talk. You're doing this on the Dead Sea Scrolls, but can you tease us? Can you appetize us? Don't give us too much, but give us enough to make us, like you mentioned, if I can tease, just to say, like, Christians use this stuff to somehow try to affirm their position. People are trying to use this apologetically. And what are you titling this series?
So the titles, I dropped a trailer for this a week ago. And it's called The Dead Sea Scrolls Unapologetically. And since the start, what I have wanted to do is a series about the scrolls that is much less confessionally dispassionate than I think anything out there. And I mean anything. The reason for this, the kind of stuff that you see on YouTube or on even on like the History Channel, the kind of information that you tend to get comes with that loaded theological bias. The strong aspect of which is that the Dead Sea Scrolls provide confirmatory evidence for the shape of the Bible. So that's, I mean, right at the outset, that's generally true, but it's not the whole story.
Sure.
Is another way I'll put it. So what I'm doing in this series of videos is I am going to be tackling directly many of the claims from apologists about what the Dead Sea Scrolls are, and what they do, and how they inform us about scriptures. Like, for example, one of the most, the most famous of the Dead Sea Scrolls is the Great Isaiah Scroll. And you will hear and you will read from Christian apologists time and time again that the text in the Great Isaiah Scroll is virtually identical to the Masoretic text. And that's just simply not true.
Wow.
And there's various ways in which we can demonstrate that's not true. So that's part and parcel in the video. The other thing that I'm wanting to do here, and this is something that you guys are both familiar with, my good friend from Menes Fakultet in the MF Norwegian School of Theology in Norway.
Dr. Mott?
Matthew Monger, Dr. Moat.
Yes.
This is something he and I have been talking about for years. So there's right away, when scholars talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it's been like this from the very beginning, the texts are divided generally into two large categories: biblical scrolls, non-biblical scrolls. And then even within the quote-unquote non-biblical scrolls, scholars have tended to divide them as sectarian and non-sectarian, being, those manuscripts which we think were probably written by the community that lived at Qumran, versus those that weren't necessarily written by them, but that were popular and they collected. So there's this compartmentalization of the text: biblical, sectarian, non-biblical. It's not necessarily an accurate way of looking at the whole collection, and one of the reasons for that is there was no such thing as a biblical text at the time of Qumran. So while something like the book of Genesis or the book of Deuteronomy is classified as a biblical text, or even something like the book of Joshua is classified as a biblical text in the categorization of the manuscripts, something like the book of First Enoch is a non-biblical text. Something like the Temple Scroll, which we didn't even know anything about prior to its discovery, is a non-biblical scroll, or possibly even a sectarian scroll. And this tends to orient people's thinking towards the whole collection right at the outset, and probably not accurately. So one of the things that I'm going to be doing within this video series is challenging a lot of the ways in which scholars even have tended to promote and to present the material from Qumran. The third video in my series is titled, "What is a Biblical Text?" anyways. Because when we look at the whole collection from Qumran, we don't really know. I mean, we have ideas, and there's ways that scholars do this. You count the manuscripts, right? So there's lots of manuscripts of Isaiah or Genesis or Deuteronomy, lots of those. So those are, and they're quoted too in other parts of their literature. So those must be biblical texts or scripture, right? But then there's also lots of copies of Jubilees, and there's lots of copies of the Chodayot and the Damascus document and the First Enoch, right? There's lots of copies of these, and there might even be quotations from some of these manuscripts too. So are those biblical scrolls? And then on the other side of this,
Good question.
There's almost nothing of First Kings. Is that a biblical scroll? There's almost nothing from Ezra and Nehemiah, which in some ways I think is a little surprising.
That is surprising because those are the later ones. Those are like the more recent ones.
And you would think these two also feed into some ideas, or they help to promote some ideas
sectarian
that you see
type.
elsewhere. Yeah, there's like this sectarian kind of there's this focus within a lot of the Dead Sea Scrolls on the purity of the land, right?
Yeah.
So why not? So, but when this stuff is absent, what do you do? What does this do to the entire discussion about what the Bible even is?
Crip Davis, this guy's gangster.
Nice. Yeah, no, and it makes you wonder if they're leaving. So texts like Nehemiah and Ezra are second temple, or texts that talk about this building of the second temple, and it makes you wonder if this community is trying to move outside of that, and they no longer care about that stuff because they're on the outside now.
That's true, and that's actually a good point, Neil. That's probably why you're probably onto something. It's not something I've thought about yet much, but you're probably onto something here about why these particular texts weren't popular among those at Qumran. The literature that I did my PhD dissertation on. Here, let me just grab this.
Sure.
It's,
by the way, I've noticed all the super chats. Thank you guys.
We're gonna get to those for sure.
Okay, so my let's see, my PhD dissertation here, the K4 Apocryphon of Jeremiah and the Qumran Jeremianic traditions. So there's 5 copies of
me and Derek saw that cave.
We didn't go in that one. We went in 11.
That one we looked at. That one we just
No, it's hard to get into Cave 4.
Yeah, that one's not open
yet. Yeah.
But you were in it.
How's that?
I said you must have gone in it.
No, actually, I have never been in Cave 4 either.
Really?
Okay. Oh, really? Yeah. Okay.
Which cave did you go? Anyway, that's a different talk.
So I've been in Cave 1 and Cave 11.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but where I mean, in the trailer where I was is where virtually nobody gets to go, and that's the vault at the Shrine of the Book where they actually keep. So this, right? Like the scroll that's on display at the Shrine of the Book in the center.
Even though they don't let you film it, still you still can't film it. Like me and Derek had our cameras and we were filming it, and they're like, "Stop filming!" Shit. But I got a nice 10-15 seconds of the whole
Oh, that's good. And I think that's probably for copyright issues more than anything.
There's the vault that you don't go in. That's where the real one is.
Yeah.
That's where you went.
Yeah. Yes, I was inside the vault where the actual manuscripts are housed, and I actually physically touched the Great Isaiah Scroll, and I spent 3 days actually working on the Great Isaiah Scroll with Peter Flynn and Eugene Ulrich.
Now, when you first went in there, you were saying something about you had leprosy, but when you touched the scroll, it eradicated the leprosy or something like that, right?
Yeah, and now it's just a mild skin rash. Sometimes I itch a little bit. That's all. So, but the walls inside the Shrine of the Book, like where you enter the Shrine of the Book, you go down the stairs, right?
Right.
and then you go in through the door. Right across the courtyard from that are the offices of the Shrine of the Book,
Sure.
and that's where the vault is.
That was
And
our
the
last
vault-
day in Israel too. That was the
Oh,
last.
really?
Yeah.
We were kind of
Oh, that's
rushed in that it was closing soon, but we got through a good amount. I just wish we.
I went on my own little tangent on that day, just completely. Just James was doing his, he was showing everybody. I just went the opposite direction and just did my own thing, had my own day. I was like, I'm just gonna get my own footage and do my own. Yeah,
that's fun. So, but the vault is like, the walls are like 1.5 feet thick, concrete. There's like a big, heavy armored door. The entire time we were in there, we were there with like an armed officer in the Israeli army with like a great big, I don't know, like an AK-47 or something inside the vault with us. It was but it was fun. It was lots of fun. So yeah, so watch. What I was getting at though was this set of 5 manuscripts in my book that I wrote about. I make an argument in there. I think this is the case, that within that text, there's absolutely no acknowledgement, period, of the Second Temple. It's like when it's a significant portion of this composition is like a retelling of the history of basically the Second Temple. Well, the history of Israel, but then like culminating in the Second Temple period. So we see in the text where the first temple, the Temple of Solomon, is destroyed. But I make a case that after the destruction of Solomon's temple, there's not even any acknowledgement from that point forward of the Second Temple. So it's and it makes sense for this community too, because they were completely disenfranchised from the establishment.
I got
at the Second Temple.
Curious thing to throw at you, and Neil, I know you want to get these super chats. Seriously, appreciate everybody.
Yeah, that's cool.
Just one brief thing, because I mean we're getting about 20 minutes in, and probably good timing to start getting their Q&A, and especially since Kip doesn't have much time.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of time.
I'm curious, and you don't have to answer this, just throwing it out there if maybe your series addresses this. Tell Siri that we have a date for later than that, and that's not the correct date. So I'm wondering if the war in 70 and what happened with Romans, if this also caused Jews to be reacting to literature they weren't already familiar with. So if it was literature that was more sectarian, let's say, or something that worked within the Qumran type group that ends up getting finally the end of this happens in 73 in Masada and in this area of the Dead Sea. I'm wondering if Jews who are thinking politically wise, like, hey, we probably shouldn't carry on this tradition of this literature. I don't know. I'm curious to know if this is something. I mean, if you have friends that are being killed and they have a certain kind of corpus, are you going to adopt their corpus so your people are thinking like them about things, or is there potential reasons to resist certain literature for that very reason? I don't know.
That's interesting, and that's not something I've thought much about before either. And let's not forget too, like there's Rome comes and rolls over Jerusalem and Masada, but then 60 years after that, they have to come back again because of Bar Kokhba. And his revolt, right? So, after that point, I think you can make a case that the rabbis who are basically left to carry on the Jewish heritage as they see it, how much motivation is for them to play as nice as possible. And to move much more deliberately away from these sorts of apocalyptic ideals that you see represented in lots of the literature. But that's a good question. It's a good point, and I don't doubt it. Right?
Yeah, definitely. Since he's talking, he's got someone. Let's go to the first super chat.
Sorry about that.
Oh, you're good, Derek. You're good. Minnie Van Tissen, thank you for the super chat. What is the deal about Elohim? Is it plural or no? It's a good question.
Wow, is that interesting? I was just chatting a little bit with Pat Lowinger about this this last week, because he was reading a text from what's his name here? I gotta look this up. So was it Justinian? Oh no, it's Julian.
Oh, Julian the Apostate, yeah.
Yeah. So he's reading Julian the Apostate.
Good text. Good stuff.
Who cites which is it? It's a text in Exodus. And in his quotation of it, he identifies the word there as plural, as gods, right? And in the Septuagint too, in that particular instance, it's plural. It's gods. But it's one of those things where what I said to Pat is that because the word occurs so frequently throughout the entire Hebrew Bible, and because there are very, very clear instances in which it absolutely is singular,
right?
There's rarely anything else to go by except for just the context of the passage, and it is generally possible to read all of these instances as singular. But I think we have managed to tease out a few of them, in particular Deuteronomy 32 verses 8-9, which I've talked about numerous times before. There are a number of these places throughout the Old Testament where it certainly looks like at one time this developed from a conception not of just a single god, but of a pantheon of gods. Maybe the most famous of these is in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, 27, I think. In the creation of man, the text says, literally, then God said, let us make man in our image. The whole phrase is plural. And then again in Genesis chapter 11, when God comes down and sees the work, or I think it's Yahweh actually in that text, where he comes down and he sees the work being done in Babylon. He says, let us confound the language of the people here. So there are clear instances where Elohim, it's plural. There's others where it's obviously singular. This is all part of a long period of development within the text that has survived.
Right. Yeah.
Is that good?
I think just a funny, interesting note, and I definitely want you to keep going, is there is I'm trying to find this image me and buddy Stephen Nelson have chat about for a long time, where there's a passage in Deuteronomy that's found only in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which really is
Deuteronomy 32, 8-9.
That's the one.
Yeah, that's so fun.
But it's not even my favorite from Deuteronomy 32, because there's another manuscript which has like a completely rewritten, restructured. It's like a six stanza part of the poem. In like Deuteronomy 32 is a poem, right? And 6 of these lines of these individual stanzas within the poem have been completely rewritten and reorganized, because they pretty clearly communicate this polytheistic ideal where God talks about getting vengeance for his sons.
Right.
So
not Israel, which is something that ends up changing. Yeah.
In that text, it changes the sons of God, the B'nai Elohim, to I believe it's Evadei Elohim, the servants of God.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then you got just north of them, you have another tradition. In Philo of Byblos was a first century author, and he supposedly is passing down an ancient text from the Bronze Age, which is no, that's not that. But scholars do point out that there are some things in this text that might have been actually passed down. Like you could see like how some of the theology he's talking about does actually line up with some of the ways they talked about the gods in the Ugaritic text. Anyways, long story short,
Totally.
that being said, he calls the god El, who's known as Kronos. That's what he says. And he says that his sons are called Elohim or Crony, Kronii. So you have another text, another
Interesting
from pagans just north of them in Lebanon, who are throwing this out there. So I think they both have
That's
a common.
pretty cool.
I think they have a common ancestor.
Yeah, if you haven't seen that video, Kip, check it out sometime. I'll send you the link.
Oh yeah, I'd like to see that. That'd be good.
Yeah.
All right, what's next?
Next question is Gaius Julius Windex. Thank you for the super chat. I love that name too. Never change that name. What's the biggest glaring difference from the Masoretic text and the DSS?
So this is such a difficult question, because when we talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls, we're talking about multiple copies of just individual books, right? Like there's 21 copies of the book of Isaiah. There's 32 copies of the book of Genesis. There's 39 copies of the book of Psalms, or of Psalms. So, and there are lots of differences between them and between the Masoretic text. So right at the outset, when you talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls and you're talking about the Bible, the Dead Sea Scrolls, it's a text that has all, just within the Dead Sea Scrolls, all sorts of differences taking place at play. Glaring differences from the Masoretic text and the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Wow. It's interesting to hear this, because you hear it all the time. There's basically no difference. Basically.
That's why he's doing a series on apologetics. I mean,
you could pick and choose, right? So if you just pick those texts from the Dead Sea Scrolls that appear to be virtually identical to the Masoretic text, this is probably not one you guys recognize. This is 1Q Isaiah B, the second copy of Isaiah found in Qumran Cave 1. It's very, very close to the Masoretic text. So if you're just picking text like this, then yeah, you can say it looks virtually identical. But then there's all these other copies where it doesn't. And the crazy thing is, the same people that collected this and other texts like it, like the Masoretic text, was also collecting copies of the same books, but that look more like the Septuagint, or more like the Samaritan Pentateuch, or more like, we don't even know what the hell this is. Right? So it's hard to answer this question, and I'm sorry, Gaius Julius Windex. I can give you a couple of examples. There's an entire paragraph that is missing from the Masoretic text that appears in the Septuagint and in one of the Hebrew copies of 1 Samuel, with regards to the Saul's attack on Yabesh Gilead. There are copies of Septuagint Jeremiah in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and Jeremiah is dramatically different from the Masoretic text, not just in terms of what's in there. Septuagint Jeremiah is a lot shorter, but it's arranged completely differently. And we see evidence for the old arrangement from the Septuagint in the Dead Sea Scrolls. In another manuscript that I worked on, which is a manuscript of Jeremiah, there is another text, and the text is the same in all the versions, in the major versions. So the Septuagint and the Masoretic text of Jeremiah at the transition between Jeremiah 7 and Jeremiah 8 looks exactly the same. The oldest copy of Jeremiah that we have, and one of the oldest quote unquote biblical manuscripts that we have, 4Q Jeremiah A, actually has there's a whole section in the main text. It's like a huge paragraph that is completely missing from this our oldest copy of the book of Jeremiah. But then another scribe, and based on my paleographical dating, this is like another scribe writing almost 100 years after the original manuscript was written, added text in the margins,
Right.
and down the side and ending upside down in the bottom margin. This text that eventually, this text that appears in the Masoretic text. Emmanuel Tov suggested this is what's called haplography, where a scribe's eye skips from one part of the text to the next. It's a difficult argument to substantiate because it doesn't look like a regular instance of haplography where the same word is occurring in two different places, and the
Right.
scribe just accidentally loses his place. And within the original copy that the scribe was copying from, we're talking about probably 10 to 15 lines. Your eye's not going to skip 10 to 15 lines of text.
Sure.
It skips 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5. 15 in some manuscripts, that's a whole column.
Yeah, that's a good point. Wow, that's a really good answer, actually.
So I hope that's,
I think that was great. Yeah.
But there's so much, guys. There's so much in there,
which is why people need to stay tuned for your work.
Stay
coming
tuned.
Up. Yeah. So definitely look out. Oh, and join the Patreon. Links in the description.
Yeah, man.
Join that. Links in the description, and that's what it looks like. It's got that cool double. What do you call that? The double negative text. Is that what it's called? Or just negative?
It's an inverted, yeah.
Inverted,
so that's a picture of 1Q Isaiah that I actually took myself, by the way.
Yeah. So stay tuned, join the Patreon, and you'll be able to find out more about this question right here. Thank you for that.
Yeah, man.
Yakuv, another friend of the channel who I love seeing in the chat. You're always around. Thank you for this. Thoughts on Jesus being in a scene or someone from Qumran community? Good question.
I would say there's a better case that John the Baptist was closely connected to the Essenes than Jesus himself. The one thing, so lots of there tends to be, or it looks like there's some overlap in terms of things that Jesus was teaching as reported in the Gospels and the theology within the Dead Sea Scrolls. And there's actually one very interesting part. I believe it's in Luke. It's probably in at least 2 of the synoptics where John the Baptist sends messengers to ask Jesus if he's the Messiah, or should we expect another one? And Jesus provides this very cryptic response. Respond to John and tell him, the blind have received sight, and the dead are being raised, and the people are having the gospel preached to them. It's a conflation of individual phrases from different parts of the book of Isaiah that are mashed together here. And there's actually a text from the Dead Sea Scrolls where this exact same mashing of these exact same passages appears, right? So, there seems like there could be a connection there. The one thing that I will say that makes me doubtful about this is that the people who wrote and collected the Dead Sea Scrolls, well, not all of them. I guess maybe he could have been like a very low level initiate, but from the bits we know about them, this was an elite group of former priests. I think most of them were probably very wealthy. Most of them were really well educated. It just doesn't seem to be Jesus' social circle. It's an open question. Good arguments have been made to suggest that, yeah, Jesus probably was connected. I think at a minimum, he was kind of like on the fringe. He was existing in the fringe of a number of the ideas that were being promoted by the Yachad Essenes.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's fair. I think it can go either way. I mean,
and I don't even want to comment now because we got to get through these.
Yeah, let's get to the next.
And I know that
I just don't want to be too quick on the question.
No, that was.
But thank you for that super chat. That's I appreciate.
Sorry, I've been such a rush, you guys.
Doctor. Oh, not sorry, not doctor. maybe one day though.
Oh, he
Pat Lowinger, who I would call him a scholar at least. Like he's
of
a
course he
scholar.
is.
And great knowledge on this stuff. Thank you for the super chat. Do these collections suggest a broader canon?
So, and this is something that I'm going to go to great pains to work through in a way that people can understand it in my video series. The whole idea of a canon is an anachronism here. There are probably collections of sacred texts that people think are important, but because we have all these different groups of Jews who are practicing Judaism differently. All these individual groups of Jews who are practicing Judaism differently also have their own little collections of texts that they like, that they think is important. So, if at Qumran you've got a canon, it's probably comprised of like I said earlier, Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy, Isaiah, the Book of the 12, First and Second Samuel. They really like that text for some reason. But then also things like the Book of Jubilees, First Enoch, something like the Book of Daniel, which looks like it's in the process of being put together at the time that they're writing and collecting the Dead Sea Scrolls. So, but yes and no. I think what the scroll suggests to us, or indicate with some clarity, that there was a huge amount of literature, much larger than what we have in our closed canon, but it was a much more dynamic understanding of what quote unquote scripture was, and it wasn't fixed and it wasn't closed.
Sure. That's a good point. Wow. That's a good question too. I never thought about that. Thank you for that, Pat. I love seeing you in the chat as well. This person dropped a nice $20 super chat. Thank you.
Wow.
It's Imposter Suspense, another name I constantly see in the chat. Good to see you. Can you tell us about the Peter? So he obviously saw our video. Can you tell us about the Peter Flynn Kim Davis dispute over Psalm 20? We did
Psalm
a whole
22.
Video. Yeah. We did a whole video about this.
Yeah. And I have to say at the outset, this is not something I ever had the opportunity to speak to Peter about in person while he was still alive. It's not something that I really came to and started looking more closely at until after he had already passed away. So I wish this was something that I had the chance to talk to Peter about directly. And what so basically the dispute is this. There is a Psalm 22 is famous as a psalm on which the gospel passion narrative is constructed. So, and Christians have a long time viewed within the crucifixion of Jesus the fulfillment of what they see as prophecies in Psalm 22. In the Septuagint version of Psalm 22, in verse 17, it says, dogs have surrounded me, and they have pierced my hands and my feet. That's the English translation of the Greek, and it's not a very good translation, but it's, I guess it's somewhat acceptable. And of course, Christian apologists in particular have drawn from this the idea that this is describing a crucifixion of Jesus having his hands and his feet pierced by nails on the cross. This is a textual variant. The Hebrew text, it actually reads, dogs surround me like a lion are my hands and my feet. Scholars tend to think that the psalmist is describing being devoured by a lion, and maybe all that's left are his hands and his feet. And there's I'm trying to be quick here, and I recommend that you go back and look at the video that I did with Neil on this. But
we went deep into it.
Yeah. So
if you want graphics and all that stuff, then watch the video. You know what?
Yeah.
While you're answering it, I'll get the link for them.
Sure, that's good. So the discrepancy here, though, just to shorten this up a little bit, Peter Flint edited all the Psalms manuscripts in in K4 from K4, and there's a lot of them, and also from Nachal Hever. And one of the manuscripts from Nachal Hever actually it preserves this passage, and the fragment itself is pretty badly damaged, but Peter reads there the word pierced as opposed to the word lion, which is where there's a textual variant here, and has suggested that this indicates, because it's our oldest copy from of this particular passage, he has suggested that this has to be the original reading, that originally was, they have pierced my hands and my feet. He wrote about this in I think about this in the Biblical Archaeology Review. He wrote about this in some of his own books about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and he taught it when he would go and speak in different churches at different places where he would speak. You can see his presentation of this online. My contention is that this isn't a very good reading of what's actually there in the photograph. I think it's not clear that it actually reads Keru, which is he pierced, as opposed to Ka'ari, which is like a lion. And even beyond that, if it does read Keru like Peter says, then I would say that most likely this is a scribal error, that this is a mistake where he mistook a small letter yod for a vav, and they're very, very similar in numerous manuscripts. It's a very frequently occurring mistake. So I've suggested that in the end, I think the misreading in the Septuagint is the result of a scribal error, and that the Christian misreading of the text is a result of a mistranslation. And I don't believe that there's enough evidence from the Dead Sea Scrolls to say that that he pierced my hands and my feet was the original.
Especially how badly damaged it is too. It's so bad.
Yeah,
but I think
bad.
you sold me on that argument. And if you really wanted to see what I saw that sold me on the argument, click the link on the video.
Maybe something that I will be able to do when it comes to that part of my video series is to look more closely at the manuscript itself, because somebody else had suggested to me that when you actually look through the whole manuscript where this fragment comes from, you'll see that the scribe actually writes the letter yod as a vav at the conclusion of words.
Yeah.
And I haven't looked at that closely at it for myself, but I intend to go back and check that out. But there's potentially another explanation. The point being, there's more than one way to show that this was not the original reading.
Nice. There you go. And I just put it in the link for the description too. So if anyone's watching this tomorrow or 2 days from now and they're like, I can't see the link in the live chat, it's in the description now, so you can check it out there too. Thank you for that, Imposter Suspense. Mr. Monster, what's going on, Mr. Monster? Good to see you always. Thank you for the super chat. How old is the Gospel of Thomas, and how come that scroll can't be considered canon? I'm sure a question that's been asked a million times.
Kip, do you want me to make a jab here?
Yeah, go for it, man. You probably know more about Gospel of Thomas than I do.
I kind of figured I would step in only in speaking on behalf of a few scholars I've communicated this idea with. Elaine Pagels thinks the Gospel of Thomas is extremely early. She's convinced that Gospel Thomas is an early voice. Mark Goodacre has written a book. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend checking it out, where he goes to make an argument that it looks to him the Gospel of Thomas knows Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, all 4 Gospels. And it's just like sayings. And it's not even like they're chronological or even like narrative forms. So they're just sayings throughout the Gospel of Thomas. The reason in your question, I'm going to repeat like Kip did, canon is anachronistic. So you have centuries where Christians are probably reading the Gospel of Thomas. I mean, They might even have it in their churches. Who knows? Justin Martyr might have been reading it and been like, oh, great book. I love it. But nobody took it to the bank. It ends up becoming ostracized when you start having the Marcionite tensions with Irenaeus and the anti-heresiologist, or the heresiologist, the anti-Gnostic fathers, if you will. And when those tensions come up, they then realize, where's this coming from? Oh, snap. That scroll that you have says something that we can't jump on. That's very docetic. We can't have them saying Jesus didn't come in the flesh. So we need to get rid of that. Or we can't have them saying, the Gospel Thomas says, look around you, when they say, when will the repose of the dead be, to Jesus? And he says, look around. The resurrection has already happened. You just can't see it. Now that is some serious realized eschatology, spiritualization going on that Christians, just the heresiologists, weren't on board. So it hasn't been asked a million times, but it depends on who you want to talk to. Because if you talk to Elaine Pagels, she's read the Nag Hammadi literature in its original tongue, she walks away and says, no, I think that the heresiologists are trying to silence some of the more early stuff that we have in this other tradition. But Goodacre thinks, hey, no, I think that Gospel Thomas knows the 4 Gospels. So I would say go read those 2 and then go further from there.
Good answer. I agree. I mean, not that I'm like some weighing in expert right now, but it made sense. Yeah, I checked the data, and he's right. No, I'm just kidding.
And why can't it be considered canon?
That's a good.
You know, I think anybody can make their own. Really,
that's true.
And I think this too is maybe a misunderstanding of what canon is in the first place. The first canon, as far as I know, was Marcion's. He was the first one who said, here's a list of books. And it was that first step that basically resulted in the church, in, other segments of the church responding with their own and saying, no, we've got ours. And, and so it's, the canon question is something that people should really think a lot more carefully about.
Yeah, definitely good question.
Good point.
Paul Schlachter. I hope I said it right. Schlachter. Thank you for that super chat. Yahweh struck me with a flu this week. Yeah, I got struck with the COVID this week. And so that my mom could find joy in taking care of me. Would ancient Jews agree on consequentialism?
What's consequent? Is that what he's describing there? Is that
like the consequence for your actions, basically?
Oh yeah. So ancient Jews were like almost anybody, where there were all sorts of varying opinions about who God was and how he operated. So yeah, certainly within some segments
Job
of early Judaism, yeah,
Job shows a different. Job shows a world in which you did something wrong because of you.
Yeah.
Even though Job's entire intention is actually say that's not the case, but that's because Jews were thinking that. Yeah.
What is Job? What is the whole book of Job doing here? Right? Like, it's responding to this idea, which you see much more strongly expressed in something like the book of Proverbs. You see it in the Torah, right? But like that's the beauty of what Job's doing. This is reactionary literature, which is basically saying this way that we have been taught to view the world is not accurate.
Yeah.
And the book of Ecclesiastes is doing the same thing again, right? So there's this to say, there's different ways in which Jews thought about God. There's different ways in which they appropriated texts of Scripture, their own ancient literatures. And I think one of the things that we miss when we're looking back into early Judaism is, how important was this literature really to larger Judaism, as opposed to just like this small sliver, the rabbi, the Pharisees, or the Sadducees even. one of the things that we don't see is this this interaction between all of these groups, because we don't have surviving texts from all of these groups. We have surviving texts from the Essenes, we have surviving texts from the Pharisees. We have nothing from the Zadokites or the Sadducees, who were, controlling the Jerusalem temple.
Right.
At the time, Judaism was very much still a temple religion, I think, more so than it was a book religion.
Yeah.
And without any with this basic void that we have, with no information about what the rulers and those who controlled the temple were thinking, it's hard to say.
Yeah. It's a good question, though. I love that. I love even thinking about this whole consequentialism thing. It's pretty interesting. Thank you for that.
Fun.
Mr. Monster is back. Thank you. Was Book of Enoch with Dead Sea Scrolls, and how come it's not considered canon as well? Another good question.
So, referring back to Derek's comments about canon and some of the stuff that I said earlier, I would say that for the writers and the collectors of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Book of Enoch was certainly part of their prioritized texts. I won't call it canon.
Paul too.
Sure. Within the church, it was popular. One of the things we see in the Dead Sea Scrolls is, yes, multiple copies of the books of Enoch. And I say the books of Enoch because there's also a lot of evidence in the Qumran material that the it was still a developing text. It wasn't fixed. There were different versions. There were additional parts to the books of Enoch that didn't survive into the modern period. For example, something called the Book of the Giants is clearly part of First Enoch, but not something that we even knew existed prior to the discovery of Qumran Cave 4 in 1953.
That's an interesting one.
And Jude does use Enoch. So
yeah, totally.
This is like anachronistic. Well, no, the next question is, sorry, please get into that.
Thank you for that, Mr. Monster. Good to see you in the chat as always. The next one, scrolling down here, wasn't ready, is that's all the way down here, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, where is it? Oh, is it from Duran Childs?
Yeah.
All right, there we go. Duran Childs, thank you for the super chat. Why? It's another Enoch question. Why was the Book of Enoch? Why was the Book of Enoch is not the Bible when the Book of Jude use quotes from Enoch?
So
did I read that right?
It actually is. The Book of Enoch is in the Ethiopian Bible.
Ooh.
Right.
So and for those who don't know, the Ethiopian church is some scholars have suggested that this is our it's kind of like a fossil of like the earliest expression of Christianity that maybe we have access to. And the reason for that is because Ethiopia ended up getting isolated from the rest of Christendom with the emergence of the Islamic Empire.
Yeah, it's like going back in the 4th century, basically.
So yeah, it's like this, some have suggested it's like this frozen snapshot in time of what the church looked like in the 4th, 5th, 6th century AD, which is really cool. And there's a lot of really cool elements within Ethiopic Christianity. One of the most interesting is this ongoing scribal tradition. So the Ethiopian Christians still copy by hand their own their own texts of scripture, and every Ethiopian community has their very own codex that they have that has been copied by hand for them, and it's very, very important to them. But all that to say, the Ethiopian scriptures contain all sorts of things that don't exist in the Protestant or even the Catholic canons, such as the books of Enoch, such as Psalms 153 and 154, which we also see in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Jubilees
is in there.
Matthew Munger talks about this, and he was like, we have to reconstruct using Ethiopic text once we have the Dead Sea Scroll fragments to then try. Man, it gets complicated, but it's amazing.
So Matthew probably talked about a little bit about this with you, because this is what he wrote his dissertation on. But he makes a case that the fragments we have of the Book of Jubilees in the Dead Sea Scrolls, indicate that at this period in time, the 1st century BC, the Book of Jubilees is still in its development. Like, it's not a fixed text. And this is the thing that I think people need to reckon with, and I want to bring a lot more light to with my own series on the Dead Sea Scrolls, is that all the books in the Bible are essentially, at least in the Old Testament, are essentially like this. They are pieces of writing that continue to get expanded and redacted and revised over long periods of time. So they were reshaped, they grew tremendously, and as ideas changed with shifting times, it was important to change and update what was going on in the scriptures themselves. So, yeah, sorry, I got sidetracked.
That's such a good point, man. And you know what happens to every single example using evolution as a model? It goes extinct if it doesn't change.
That's right.
So the people who are fundamentalists are actually helping to cause their own tradition to go extinct. Thank you. You can pat yourself on the back. So, I mean, I'm serious. This is what will end up happening. So if you want to see a tradition progress, why don't people progress with their tradition? So,
yeah,
there you have it.
Or it's like how on the flip side of that, you have heresiologists who want to argue against a heresy, and by writing about that heresy, they accidentally let that heresy survive throughout the ages. Now we know about them. We're like, oh,
we hate Marcion because Marcion said Jesus did not suffer and he was not really in the flesh. And he's
right, exactly. Now we know what other Christians were thinking about.
Right.
So it's like, it's so cool that by accident the heresiologists actually like defeat themselves.
Yeah,
great.
Kip,
that was the last one. So
this was such a last minute, like. Neil's been dying and sick for multiple weeks. And I was like, he goes, can you get a scholar to join us? Because if not, it's just going to be me and you. And I was like, dude, you were the first person.
I didn't say like that.
I thought about
fine with it. You made it seem like
I know. No, I was the one. No, I was the one. I was the one who was like, yo, okay, I'm going to try and get you a scholar here. But you're the first person I thought of. And I was
it's because I'm easy.
Nice. No, this is. I always love getting you on, because I don't know anyone else.
Because I'm an attention whore.
I don't know anyone else.
I have to hear the sound of my own voice, or I'll go crazy.
But I don't know anyone else who I could think of who I could just go to and ask questions about, like, real hard level scholarship on ancient Hebrew text.
Yeah,
and maybe even get some right answers. Maybe,
yeah,
but probably not.
Ken Scaletta has dropped the $5 super sticker. Thank you, Ken Scaletta.
Nice.
That. I don't know. How much time do you have left, Dr. Kip?
I don't have a lot of time.
30 seconds.
We're actually going to go see. I'm taking my family, most of my family, to see the new Avatar movie this evening. So,
that looks good.
Let me know if it's good. Yeah,
I will.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. So,
we got to plug
I think I probably that's probably it for me. But thanks for having me on, and I hope you feel better, Neil.
Definitely, I'm getting there.
Okay,
still got a little bit of a cough, but I'm not like stuck to my bed anymore, so we're good.
This right here, the coming soon. So if you haven't seen it, go check it out.
It's 1 minute, you guys. You can spare 1 minute to
now
watch
the guitar beat that you have in there, is that gonna ding us if we try to play it?
No. It's all free and clear.
Okay, well then let's
play it.
Let's play it. I mean, dude,
but then everybody who watches it has to go back and put a thumbs up.
Yeah, you have to
my channel,
go thumbs. Right? Bingo. So I think it's worth it.
Drop a link in the chat.
Yeah, drop. You want me to?
But let's
have it if you have it.
Let's watch it. Yeah, drop the link and let's watch it, because I think it's pretty cool.
The most significant find by far is called the Great Isaiah Scroll, and this is in Cave 1. I've actually been there. I've actually climbed up the mountain, went into the cave, and seen with my own eyes the place where they found this scroll.
Not that we are comparing, but here is video footage of me actually inside the vault with the actual Great Isaiah Scroll, working on it with Professors Eugene Ulrich from the University of Notre Dame and the University of Toronto, and Peter Flynn from Trinity Western University. But good for Sean.
Nice. Unapologetically.
So just so you guys know here, the plan is to take the stuff that I produce in this video series and then also turn it into a book. And I think when it comes time for the people, just because you watch the videos, it doesn't mean you can't buy you shouldn't buy the book. And the reason for that is because even as I'm making the videos and I'm thinking through what the book is going to look like, I'm probably going to shift things up a little bit. One of the things that Matthew Monger brought up when I've been talking to him just about this video series, and one of the big challenges when it comes to even just teaching the Dead Sea Scrolls is that there's a template in place. Like there's a way to teach it, right? If you sign up for a Dead Sea Scrolls course at pretty well any university, the syllabus will look very much the same. You always start with the discovery, then you start with the biblical text, and then you start with the biblical scrolls, and then you go on to, the life of the community and the theology and their text. So there's a way of doing it. And we've inherited this template from basically the first scholars who looked at and examined the scrolls. And something that Matt told me when we were throwing ideas back and forth, he's like, this story has been told this way for so long, and is this really the place that you want to start? He basically asked me, do you really want to start with the Bible? Because I'll say something else about the video series itself too. I've kind of structured it in response, but not really, to a set of videos that was made by Matt Whitman of the 10-Minute Bible Hour. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him.
I've heard him.
Yeah,
he's really good. He's a Christian apologist, but he's really good. And he's
quite a few good Christian apologists out there.
And his video series on the Dead Sea Scrolls I really like, but it's very short, right? But one of the things that he says right at the start is like he does this thing with this box of Apple Jacks, and he's pulling stuff out as a way of illustrating what's in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's very clever, right? But he starts off by saying, the thing with a box of Apple Jacks that you'll always find is, even though there's toys inside and there's prizes that you can get, what's mostly in a box of Apple Jacks is Apple Jacks. And just like what's mostly in the Dead Sea Scrolls is Bible. And that's just not a right, maybe that's not the right way to think about these texts, considering that, we have maybe 1,000 individual manuscripts and only 200 of them are quote unquote Bible. So something that Matt suggested to me, he's like, well, what if we just like switched up the whole way that we start looking at these manuscripts, the starting point? What if we even just change the starting point? Instead of starting from Bible, let's go somewhere else. And I'm like, that's a good idea. I can't do it for the videos because it's already, I'm kind of committed to this structure on the basis of the 10-Minute Bible Hour videos. But when it comes to the book, I'm already starting to think about ways to shift the way that we think about these texts, and I think it's going to be pretty exciting.
Wow.
I think I saw one more there.
Yeah, there was another one, a couple questions too. Dr. Kip from Ken Scaletta. Thank you, Ken, for the super chat. Dr. Kip, do you believe there's any chance the author of G. Mark knew any of the Qumran literature?
We need Derek's meme here, right? There's always a chance.
Well, you're telling me there's
chance. Always a chance. And I think what I mentioned earlier, this illustration, about the way in which Jesus responded to John the Baptist when John the Baptist was in prison, suggests that there's some overlap here, right? There's some possible connection. So I don't see why not. Although, we just don't have much access to a connection if there was one there. So
it's hard to know if G. Mark or the author Mark would know a different language, because he's writing in Greek, and you can tell that's his first language. The way he's writing. So, are they writing in Greek? This is a question you need to know. Like, are they? There's a lot of questions.
Also, when are you thinking the first will drop from Nidimus?
So it's happening within days.
Oh wow!
That's maybe Boxing Day.
Nice.
Okay.
Is that a Canadian holiday?
It's a British holiday originally, I think.
Yeah.
But we have Boxing Day. I actually
always on our calendars, but I just never know what it was.
Yeah. I have no idea what it's about. I just know that
I want to look it up.
It was once a good time to go shopping.
Yeah. Celebrate after Christmas. Originally as a holiday to give gifts.
Yeah. And then I think after the first one, it'll probably be once a month, once every 6 weeks for a new installment.
You always wonder, the ones that are like give to the poor, no one cares about. Like the only holidays people care about is like, party, food. Yeah, those are the good holidays. Give to the poor, I don't even know what that is.
Well, it serves a practical purpose, I guess. That's why they see it that way. So
yeah, exactly. But that's the last.
Do Canadians get into the ring? I will say this about Boxing Day. Do Canadians get into the ring on Boxing Day? Within Canada, traditionally, Boxing Day is the first day of the World Junior Hockey Championship. This is the under 20. The under 21.
It's such a big deal that I know about it in Buffalo. World Junior in Canada is a huge deal.
So this is very much a Canadian tradition. Boxing Day is always, the start of this 2-week tournament, and it's something that huge numbers in Canada watch every year.
And if you look at most of the NHL players that are Canadian, they'll have their history of the World Juniors and where they were, what team they played for back then.
Lots of them do,
You mostly know who they are, yeah.
And it's because Canada is dominant.
Yeah. Yep. They have the most most players in the NHL, that's for sure.
Oh.
But know what's weird about hockey? Last thing I'll say.
No, let's talk hockey.
You get a lot of Russians, a lot of Swedes, a lot of Czech Republic area people. But it's mostly Canada, a lot of Americans too. Well, mostly not from mostly New York or what's that?
Minnesota,
like all the northern hockey places.
New England.
Yeah.
California, there's starting to be more players are coming out of California now. It curiously, very, very few Norwegian hockey players and almost no Danish hockey players.
Yeah.
And that was something even when I was in Norway, I was like, it was a bit mind-boggling to me that hockey wasn't more popular there.
Yeah. So, we have Patrick Kane from Buffalo.
Love Patrick Kane.
He used to get in a lot of trouble around here too.
Yeah, I remember. I remember. So
anyways,
good stuff.
Thank you for your time.
Kid, thank you, man.
Totally.
Dr. Kill.
Guys. Have a good day.
All right.
Have a good holiday, everyone.
You too.
Merry Christmas.
Happy Saturnalia.
Merry Christmas.
Oh, today's the 21st. Isn't that the last day of Saturnalia? Maybe second last day or something. I think Saturnalia was from the 14th to the 22nd or something. Maybe 23rd actually. I don't know. Whatever. Someone else can put in the chat what the answer to that is. But anyways, it's that time of the year though. It's the holidays.
It is.
So that's it. That's it. I'm gonna close this thing out, hit the outro, and you have just attained true gnosis.
You have just attained true gnosis. The demiurge has no power over